The holidays are coming fast. I got out of my car the other day. It was the day after Halloween, and I was at my local shopping area, and I noticed all the Christmas decorations, the holiday wreaths, the huge ones on top of the storefronts were already up. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, I know we're getting into November, but maybe this has been happening every year. Is it just me, or are the holiday decorations starting just earlier and earlier and earlier? I had this thought while I was looking at all of this and taking it in and realizing it's the day after Halloween. It is November 1st. And when I was younger, I remember that it was Thanksgiving and you had the Thanksgiving, the Macy's Day Parade. And it was like right around that time when all the Christmas holiday decorations went up everywhere. And I know that's been changing and getting earlier and earlier. And maybe I've just never noticed it before. And this has been happening for, 8 years. I just cannot believe on November 1st, we already have the Christmas wreaths up. So all of that being said, I am realizing the holidays are here. Or depending on your perspective, they're just right around the corner. Maybe you're not ready to put up your Christmas tree yet, but maybe you are. Maybe you're one of those people that likes to put your Christmas tree up like midway through November, if not earlier. So as I record this, it is still early-ish November. And for many of us, I think, especially those of us who we might describe as gifted or sensitive, high capacity, we are the ones very used to carrying a lot in general. And so the holiday seasons brings this beautiful, strange, sometimes agonizing mix of joy, excitement maybe, and exhaustion. And I don't know where you fall in that spectrum of feelings. Maybe it's all of it, but I just want to talk about this season a little bit. And we're going to delve into this a little bit more this month. But today, I really want to talk about just seasons in our life. Right now, it's the holiday season. So it's very, it's a very particular kind of season where the pace seems to really ramp up for a lot of people just because of our cultural norms. But I want to talk about just any season that you may have been in or that you might be in where exhaustion becomes the norm. And I want to talk about how do we live and work from a place of rest. So stay tuned if you're wondering, yes, how do I do that? This episode is for you. Welcome to the Power to Flourish podcast, where science meets the art of a beautiful life. I'm Dr. Andrea Line, positive psychologist, giftedness expert and coach, and modern-day spiritual godmother to brilliant, deep-feeling women. This isn't just another self-help podcast. It's a sanctuary, a sacred space to come back to yourself. Each week, we'll explore the emotional experience of gifted, sensitive women and what it means to live a life that feels as beautiful as it may look. Because flourishing isn't a luxury, it's your birthright, and your life is waiting. This is the Power to Flourish podcast. So welcome back to the podcast. I am your host, Dr. Andrea Line, and I want to open just with a little story of a snapshot of my life. It wasn't that long ago, but it also was, several years ago at this point. And I've talked a little bit about this before, but there was a time where I was leading a boarding school. It was a therapeutic boarding school, a residential school, which means that the kids there lived there. They went to school there. They were there all the time, basically 365 days a year. And I loved working with these kids. And I loved working with the families. And it was so much fun. And there's a lot of work that goes with, making sure a school of, they were teenagers, there just comes a lot with ensuring the safety, the well-being, everything, even just basic things, right? Making sure they're fed, making sure they they have everything they need, making sure they have like fun activities to do. And because it was therapeutic, obviously, there were a lot of goals around their healing. So I just remember there was a moment where, running from meeting to meeting was pretty normal for me. And I think for anyone who's ever worked in a school setting or a college setting, you can relate to this feeling of, I don't know when I'm actually going to be able to go to the bathroom or eat any food, right? It's just, especially in my role and the nature of the school, it was just, it was back to back. I was like running, 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 running. It was never boring, I should say. Never, ever boring. But there was a time pretty close to when I finally ended up deciding to leave this job where I could barely keep my head up at my desk. And when I say that, I mean literally, I physically could hardly like sit up and keep my head up at my desk. Now, I later learned after seeing many different doctors that there were lots of things going on. One of the things that they found out was I had a reactivated Epstein-Barr virus like episode, which is basically it's mono. So I was extremely exhausted. I basically had mono, but I didn't know I had that at the time. But I was so exhausted. And I just remember having to lead these meetings. I would be the leader in all of these meetings back to back and not just facilitate the meeting, but of course, strategizing for the whole school because that was my job. And at some point, and my staff, they were so wonderful and so, understanding. I just knew like, I cannot keep doing this. And at that moment, when I was having that thought in this particular meeting, I can remember exactly where I was and who was in that meeting. I wanted to lay my head on the table. Like I needed to lay my head on the table, which is not the most professional way, to run a meeting. And so it was frustrating because at that point, doctors couldn't figure out what it was. Was this just burnout, right? Like pretty bad if that's what it is. And there were, like I said, there were some medical issues going on that I didn't know about. But the truth is like that diagnosis and that episode, that season where I could hardly walk. I remember the other thing was I couldn't walk from my doorstep up the gravel road, which was it's a longish little road to get up to the mailbox because we lived out in the country. So I just remember having a hard time doing that. I mean, I was just so exhausted and I thought, what is wrong with me? Like, what is wrong with me? I literally cannot do anything, which is very difficult and very humbling if you are the kind of person who has always done everything and have just powered through life. I don't know if you can relate to that, but that was definitely me. I powered through life and I was pretty good at it and it seemed to be effective strategy. So I just kept doing that. Why change something that's not broken? Or it seemed like it wasn't broken until, it's very broken. So there I was. I'm in this season. This was like the beginning of, it was sort of midway, but also the beginning of like a longer healing journey, longer than I thought it was going to be. That lasted several years of me really like hitting the brakes because I had to. My body was like, you've got to hit the brakes. And then intentionally really slowing down. And now living a life that's very different than the way I was living for decades. I remember also before that moment, a very wise person in my life, a mentor, actually now my father-in-law, at the time was not my father-in-law, but at the time, this person actually was my pastor. That's a whole other story about how my pastor became my father-in-law. I'll save that for another episode if you're curious. But I remember him talking about living and working from a place of rest. And I remember hearing about this. I remember hearing him teach about it. I remember contemplating this concept and thinking, what does that even mean? I mean, this was years ago. I was probably in my 30s. I really thought, I truly do not understand because my life and my job and the responsibilities I had, and again, I was a single mother, I could not envision living the life that I was living from a place of rest. I just I just didn't understand that concept. I didn't understand how that was possible. I certainly didn't. I kept trying to apply it in my life, but everything in my life was just, again, the nature of the work that I was doing was there were a lot of crisis moments, like there was crisis intervention as part of it. And so, it's hard to feel like you're at rest when you're dealing with constant crises and there's like chaos. Not that there was necessarily chaos in my personal life, but there's just a lot, right? And I think we can all kind of relate to that feeling of how do I live and work from a place of rest when the things that are happening in my life do not feel restful? That was my question. This was, for me, a theme that started again, maybe more than 10 years ago, probably 15 years ago. And I thought, I don't know if I'm ever going to understand or be able to apply that. To be, perfectly honest with you, I just didn't understand. Now, I watched this person, again, my father-in-law, I watched him seem like live this way. It seemed possible for him. And I imagine maybe possible for other people. But for me, it felt kind of impossible. Or if it was possible, I just did not understand or know how to get from where I was to that place. So you may be listening to this and actually think, no, I feel like I'm doing pretty well. I feel like I can live and work from a place of rest. And if that is you, fantastic. And I encourage you to spread the word. Like, tell all your friends. Tell your friends how you are doing it. Because I do think that for many women in our society today, and especially women who can do a lot, they're really good at doing a lot. Some part of them probably actually really likes doing a lot. Again, I like the fact that I could accomplish a lot. And there's still a bit of that part of me that can feel, and I'm not proud to say this, I'm just being honest. I can feel good about the fact that I'm the kind of person who can handle a lot. Like it's a badge of honor or something. You know what I mean? I think that a lot of that is the way, we are just reinforced in our culture. It's like we get praised for it. So it's hard to undo that way of thinking. But for me, I want to share a little bit and to encourage you again in this context of we're going into the holiday season. So for most of us, even if we feel like we can rest relatively well at other times of the year, this season usually gives us opportunity for learning how to do this just a little bit better, right? I feel like every year it's like a little bit of okay, how am I going to approach this season this year? And I learn from previous seasons and then I sort of revamp. I sort of, I take that data and I enter it into my equation for how I want to, attempt this next season, 2025, as I record this. So let's first just jump into what do I mean when I say rest, and what does it mean to live and work from a place of rest? What I didn't fully understand, and I am sure I am still learning. I hope I will learn more over the next several years of my life, and in 10 years have even more wisdom around this concept than I do now. But I do think that younger version of me that really could not fathom had a life, first of all, structured in such a way that it was very difficult just on a practical level for my nervous system to ever feel at rest. There were some environmental things. I think I'm going to talk about rest from an internal place. However, there are also things in our environment that are going to help us on that journey or impede us. And those are real things too that we have to look at and make decisions about whether we're going to keep those things in our life or not. So I've said this before in other places. I've written about this in blogs, but for gifted women, for high achieving women, I'll put it that way. For many high achieving women, rest often feels unsafe, and it means letting go of control. And letting go of control can feel extremely anxiety producing, right? And it can make us feel like a failure if we let go of the control, or what happens could make us feel like we're a failure. And while it's true that there are some environmental things that we can very intentionally shift and make decisions about, true rest is an inside job, right? So if we can only feel at rest or only feel peaceful when everything else around us is peaceful, then that's going to be a pretty hard life to live. If we're striving or longing for peace, but the only way we can get there is when our life circumstances line up perfectly. That just never happens in my experience. Maybe there are moments, right? Maybe there are those moments like when I'm in Hawaii and I'm at the Royal Hawaiian, one of my favorite spots, and I'm with my daughter and we're like sipping on a virgin pina colada. Then yes, I guess I could say in that moment, I feel very much at peace, at rest. But that is not normal life. That is not normal life. That is not everyday life. People have kids, they've got jobs, they've got, I've worked with a lot of people who are ER doctors, and the nature of their job is emergencies, right? Or maybe you're a nurse in a crisis situation, or even if they're not emergencies, like there are many jobs, whether they are paid or you are doing them in your home, that are intense and don't feel particularly peaceful. So it is important to understand, how do we create or pay attention to, maybe that's a better way to put it, of what is happening inside of us and what we can do to invite that feeling of rest and safety in your body, through our spirit, through watching our thoughts. There's lots of different ways. I'm not going to go into all of those right now, but those things help us come to that place of rest on the inside, regardless of what is happening on the outside. I just don't want to go to the extreme of suggesting that we should never change anything on the outside, because we know for sure, research shows, right? There are places, there are environments. It's very important. Our environment is very important. So to the degree that you can minimize some things that are extremely stressful, to the degree that you can, I do encourage you to look at your life and try to do that. And that's exactly what I ended up having to do. But again, not really the focus for today's episode. I want to talk about a sort of framing that we, again, I think get conditioned to believe, that rest is something we get after we've worked really hard. Maybe even then we don't feel like we really deserve it. Or it's like we have to, I don't know, we have this long list of things that must happen in order for us to rest. And so if that's the way we think about it, how on earth could we ever live and work continually from a place of rest? Like that mindset shift has to happen. I think that was maybe part of what mindset shift needed to happen for me back when I first heard about this, because I was thinking of rest just in a different way than I think of it now. And what has happened for me in my journey and what I offer for you just to reflect in your own life to see where am I when it comes to this, which is how much is my achievement, production, work, performance, fill in the blank. How much of this is tied to my sense of identity, my sense of value, my sense of worth? Because whether it's conscious or not, and mine was somewhat conscious and probably somewhat unconscious, but I think some elements. Like I said, my identity had been formed around this version of me that was like, I can get it done. I do get it done. I'm responsible, because to not be that meant, oh, I guess I was irresponsible, right? And that doesn't sound good. Who wants to be irresponsible? Not me. Especially with the decisions I had made earlier in my life. See, here's the context, right? How like shame and guilt like drives us forward. So I'm thinking, I mean, even though I for sure was struggling with this ever before I got pregnant, but I got pregnant unexpectedly. And I felt like that was irresponsible of me, right? That was very irresponsible. I was 19 years old. It was not my plan. I was not married. Like there were so many things about it that were irresponsible. And the only way I knew to try to make it right was to take responsibility, which I did to the best of my ability, right? And have the baby, raise this baby, all the things. I'm using this as an example of like the context for me. Fast forward, now I'm in my 30s, to have an identity that was anything but I am uber responsible, right? Because I can't, not just I can't be seen by others as being irresponsible. I can't see myself that way. I don't want to see myself that way. So even when no one is looking, even when no one's paying attention, even when like really no one cares, I am going to drive myself into the ground being super, super responsible because that was part of the identity. That was part of, what I was, again, unconsciously running away from. There were some other conscious things that I was doing, but that's just an example. I'm just giving you an example. You may not be able to relate to any of that specifically, but many of us have drivers. Our behavior we are driven by something. And if we're not conscious of what those things are, we have a hard time being able to make conscious, intentional decisions about how we're going to live our life and the decisions we're going to make. And whether or not we are going to rest, whether or not we are going to live and work from a place of rest. And as it relates to the holidays, since we are coming up into the season, whether or not we give ourselves permission to enjoy this season. And that doesn't mean you have to take everything off the calendar unless you want to. But what does that mean for you to rest in all the expectations that you may have for yourself or that family members have for you or whatever else is happening? So rest, just to frame this again, rest is what happens when we stop trying to earn the life we've already been given, when we trust that everything will be okay, when we can surrender that. That was, gosh, huge for me. Huge to be able to get to that point and still practicing it all the time, right? In real time in 2025. But we trust that everything's going to be okay, not because it's up to us to manage every single detail, but because we're no longer trying to be our own source of safety. We have things that we can do for sure. Again, I'm not saying don't take any responsibility. Like you have decisions to make. But when we feel like we've got to hold it for us, for everyone else around us, that is when living and working becomes such a burden. It's no longer light. When was the last time you felt light? When was the last time you could truly say, like, I am living and working from a place of lightness? That's what I'm talking about. When things can be easy, not always easy, like it doesn't take hard work, but easy from the sense of the inside. It is grace filled. There is an ease. There is a rest. That is what I've come to learn is what that living from a place of rest feels like. I'm still doing the hard work. Like I think about today, I think about this season of my life. There's plenty of things still on my plate of things to do. Although I have crafted a life that looks and feels very, very different from what it was, very intentionally. So that is part of it. But I also approach the work I do very differently. That is an inside job. That is the mindset shift. That is the surrender and the trust. So I want to just add here, there's fascinating research that shows our nervous system mirrors our internal state. So when we shift from hypervigilance to trust, whether, that might be for you through breath work, or maybe for you, it's more through prayer or meditation or just reflection, just getting quiet, whatever helps you. Maybe it's all those things, whatever helps you get to that place. When we do that, we activate the parasympathetic system, which then restores calm and clarity. So we have these tools that I've talked about in previous episodes to actually slow it down for ourselves and get to that place that feels like rest in our body. And then when we can get to that place, we have not just more calm, but we have more clarity. We can then move on to the other things that might be our responsibilities at work or in the home from that place of calm and clarity. So, a question for you, just in the pause. Where in your life right now are you still possibly striving to feel safe? And I might not use the words feel safe because that conjures up a lot of things. And I don't mean to say that we're all running around, like not feeling safe. But maybe I'll put it this way. Where in your life are you afraid to give up control? If you were to lay something down, give up control, give up managing the thing. Usually whatever just came to mind, when we think about taking our hands off that, there can be that fear. There can be that anxiety. There can be like, oh, no, like I can't do that because if I did that, then this would happen, right? That's what I mean by striving to feel safe. We're doing what we think we need to do to like keep it all together. That is what helps us feel safe, right? So just think about that as I continue on. And I'm going to go through very relatively quickly 3 things that I really started focusing on in this season when I shared at the beginning when I couldn't keep my head up off the table. It was really horrible. It was such a tough season. I thought it would never end. And I really thought, oh my goodness, am I just always going to be like this? I was so exhausted. But I realized, okay, things need to shift. And I actually started taking a little bit of time to work from home. This was before people worked from home, really. I had to just kind of flex my schedule. I tried to not stay too long at work. I had to set up more boundaries. I just had to do some intentional things at work for sure. But I also needed to double down on some areas that none of these things are going to be shocking to you. And the things that I'm going to share are widely now, again, in this time, 2025, widely regarded as foundational to our emotional well-being, our mental health, our psychology. However, I will just add that even just 10 years ago, and maybe even less actually, these were not necessarily things that, at least from the mental health field, were widely discussed. And even today, I think most people don't question it anymore because there's a lot more research backing it up. But we're in this transition, which is wonderful, that these that this research is getting out there, people understand it, and even therapists, other professionals are incorporating it. Like, to me, this is no brainer. To me, this is absolutely, like, we don't even need to discuss it. These are very important. These are foundational. This was my holistic approach to my own healing. And this is what I wanted to share today as part of this rest piece. So the first thing was food. And I am not a nutritionist, so I'm not speaking from that place, and I'm not going to tell you what you should and shouldn't eat. And everyone has a different idea about that. But I do think that nourishing our bodies, it nourishes our brains and our mind, right? Where everything is connected. So during that season for me of healing, I dove into on my own a lot into the literature in functional medicine. I didn't know anything about functional medicine at the time. It opened up a whole new world to me. And so from that place, I started learning about how food affects XYZ, right? And I just started making changes, first on my own, and then with the help of a functional medicine doctor, which was amazing. And actually, I currently live in North Carolina, and the functional medicine doctor I found is here where I now live. But when I found this person, I was living in Massachusetts. And this is how this is a side note, but this is just how desperate I was to get well. I would fly to North Carolina, to where I am right now. Again, at the time, I didn't live here. I would fly for appointments because lots of different reasons why I was flying all the way here for that. But part of it was because they took my insurance, and it's hard to find a functional medicine doctor that takes insurance, or at least it was back then. Anyway, I'm sharing that because I was like, I was just determined to find someone who could help me, because none of my other doctors, and I had wonderful and smart doctors, but no one could figure it out. And actually, I remember one of the doctors suggesting that maybe I was depressed because my daughter had gone off to college. And I remember like wanting to pull up my hair because I thought, oh my goodness, I know what depression feels like. One, because I've been depressed in my life, so I know what that feels like. Also, I'm a psychologist. I know what that is. And I just wanted to scream, like, this is not what that is. Like, no, it is not, because my daughter went off to college. Like, she's an hour away. And it was kind of it was sad that she was leaving, but I wasn't depressed about it. Anyway, come to find out, I had Epstein-Barr virus. But anyway, that's for another episode. So I go down this rabbit hole. I start learning about functional medicine. I start learning about foods. I start learning about food sensitivities, all the things. And I started changing how I was eating, very intentional. And, lo and behold, again, I'm not saying anything that you probably haven't already heard because everyone talks about it now, but I just want to emphasize how important. There's actually a whole new, relatively new field called nutritional psychiatry. That did not exist 10 years ago, I don't think. Maybe it did, but it was very small. And certainly when I was in graduate school, nobody, not a single person in the mental health field that I was aware of, not in psychiatry, were talking about nutrition. So this is a relatively new field to understand how foods and how we nourish our body affects our mood. Again, I am not a nutritional psychiatrist and I am not a nutritionist, but I can tell you that whole unprocessed foods can lower, this is what Harvard's nutritional psychiatry research has shown, can lower rates of anxiety and depression. So, and on top of that, right, it's even if you don't identify as someone that struggles with anxiety and depression, it is not going to hurt you to make sure you are fueling your body with healthy, whole, unprocessed foods. So when I started being very intentional, not just increasing the amounts of whole foods, but decreasing foods that I was having issues with, let's just say like sensitivities to and causing inflammation in my body, um, I I noticed a shift pretty quickly. And I remember actually being shocked about how quickly I started noticing changes. And I went to the person I was seeing at the time and said, "Is this possible that I could have all these changes like in a month?" And she just looked, I remember she looked at me and said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I just remember thinking, this is wild. How come no one ever told me this? For me, I wanted to clarify. For me, it wasn't so much mood, although I totally believe it. I'm sure it helped my mood, but I was dealing with a lot of different medical issues, not just the Epstein-Barr virus, but endometriosis and just a lot of other things that were going on at the time that were very painful. And as soon as I started eating differently, it improved. So that was amazing. But I just want to encourage you that if you're thinking, how can I support my body and my mind even as I go into this holiday season? Do not forget about the power of food and drinks, what you're putting in your body, what you're putting it in and what you're not putting in. Not that we can't have fun over the holidays, but just keep it in mind. The next thing that I want to highlight, again, nothing earth shattering, but moving your body. So I was working so hard that I hardly ever, I will say it this way, I had a hard time making time. My schedule and my priorities were such that my body usually came last. I would take walks outside, sure. I would do little things here and there, but it was very hard for me to move my body in the way it really needed to during all this time. Plus, I was so exhausted. Like I said, I could hardly walk to the mailbox because there were some, underlying issues happening. But in general, movement is so important. It is really a medicine that again, mental health professionals, I think, are just finally, thank goodness, beginning to talk about. In other countries, they've been prescribing movement as the prescription for things like depression, as the first course of treatment. In the United States, it has always been usually a combination of sort of the evidence-based treatment. The gold standard in the United States has been CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, with medication. That is usually the pairing that is recommended for depression specifically in the United States. But just know, and I want to highlight this because most people, unless you're in this field, do not know this. In other countries, that is not the case. So I just think it's interesting because we do, unfortunately, live in a country where I believe there are big industries that, getting medication in a capitalist society that makes money off of that is going to be prioritized over going outside for a walk, which is free usually, right? So anyway, that's my little side rant, but we do know now, there is no doubt about it. Studies after study after study has shown that even 10 minutes, it does not need to be a full, power workout for 60 minutes, but 10 minutes of daily movement. This can be a nice brisk walk, can lower your cortisol and improve emotional regulation. And like I said, improve symptoms of depression and anxiety. And it's really our body's way of saying like, thank you for listening, because we are made to move. We need to move. And our modern culture, just the whole setup and working all the time, right? It's very hard. I'm sitting here recording a podcast, just sitting, and I've been sitting on meetings and I'm sitting. So after this, I'm going to go outside and take a walk. And lastly, rest as renewal. I've talked a lot about the rest, but I just want to highlight it one more time, especially as you're thinking this season, in particular in the holiday season. Real rest is not just about stopping, although stopping is an important part of it. And we do need to learn how to stop. But it is, like I said earlier, it's about surrendering the illusion that everything depends on you. And I have struggled with this my entire life. And again, let's make it real specific for the holiday season. There's all these things. And if you are like me, you think this depends on me, and this depends on me, and this depends on me. And oftentimes, not in every household, but oftentimes it's because we have learned as women to take on certain roles around the holidays, right? I do think that in my family, most people would agree that even in when I was younger, family of origin, I was the oldest of four. And so I was always happily helping my mom do all the things for Christmas. Well, I enjoyed it. And also I was the oldest. So I was, I got to play more of a role in creating the whole experience for everyone. And then that translated into the rest of my adult life where I'm like creating the experience for everyone else. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I am the architect of everyone else's wonderful holiday experience until at some point in your life, and if you're younger, maybe you haven't hit this point yet, but at some point after you've done that for many years and you're just really tired, or there are just new things in your life, like maybe you're in a season where you have a brand new baby, or maybe you have twins, or maybe you have three under the age of 3. I'm thinking of lots of different people right now who fall into those categories in my own life, people I know. There are different seasons. You could be taking care of a parent. You could be going through your own health issue. Honestly, my own health issues forced me to stop and really forced me to just like give up having whatever I thought was like the perfect Christmas, So this is where we really can help ourselves by giving ourselves permission to slow down, enjoy the holidays, delegate. Or if you think, oh, I can't delegate because no one else is going to do it, well, then maybe no one else does it. And can you sit with the outcome of whatever that decision is? That is the place of power when we can sit through whatever might feel very uncomfortable if we let go of something and if we're committed to that, right? I mean, you can always choose to go ahead and do it. Most of us do. But if you decide, no, I'm not going to do that, and everyone else is going to be impacted, and we're all just going to sit with that consequence. If no one else is going to step in and do it, that's fine. Then everyone learns, maybe someone steps up next year if it's important to them, if you're not going to do it, whatever the thing is, right? But all of because this is all relational systems. And when you change something about how you're going to do things, by definition, everyone else in your system, the family system, the social system, whatever the system is that you're in, by definition must change because that's how systems work. So you don't have to change, you don't have to try to change everyone else. You just change you. I'm sure you've heard that before, but that is how it works because it's a system. Everything is connected. So my encouragement to you is to think about how you want to go through the next 6 to 8 weeks, whatever it is on the calendar. I haven't even looked yet. We are going to have more discussions about this month. I'm so excited to dive into it because I do think it's really important to practice what flourishing looks like in all the different seasons of life. And again, everyone, their circumstances are going to be different. You might be a single woman and you're just in a different season, and you can do lots of things. One, because you don't have children to take care of. Maybe you don't have a husband to worry about, or you don't have a boyfriend to worry about. You don't have other, multiple families to go to. You can just fill up your social calendar and enjoy it, and you're not tired and you love it. Great. Do that. That is what flourishing through the holiday season could look for you. That is beautiful. And someone else has, a 6-week-old baby and they're just trying to like get through the day. Great. This holiday season hopefully will look very different, maybe from previous seasons when you could do more. You should be slowing down, right? It's all personalized. It's all very unique to whatever the circumstances for you. But these three things, the nutrition, the movement, and the restoration, the rest as renewal are really, really important at all times. But I just wanted to come in here today and encourage you that you do not need to go through the holiday season like a chicken with your head cut off or whatever you want to call it. Like you could actually just enjoy it, and you get to determine how you're going to do that. So before you go, I want to give you just a moment to practice what we've been talking about. If you're driving, please do not do this. Wait until you can be home or at work and have a minute where it's safe and you can just sit and breathe. So pause if you're driving, but otherwise, or if you're going for a run, don't do it right now. Just wait. But for everyone else, if you can, I just invite you to close your eyes and breathe in deeply and let your shoulders drop. And whisper to yourself, I don't have to strive. I can trust that all will be well. And feel that peace in your body. Feel that sense of internal rest. It's what living from rest feels like. If this conversation resonated with you, I'd love to invite you into my live holiday masterclass, The Gift of Rest. And we're going to take these ideas and make them real and map out your calendar, your energy, and your rhythms of peace for this season. You can find the link in the show notes. I'm so excited to offer this to you. And remember, rest isn't earned, it's received. And let that be your rhythm this week. Until next time, keep flourishing. Thank you for listening to the Power to Flourish podcast. I hope today's conversation left you feeling more seen, more supported, and more deeply connected to yourself. And if this episode resonated, would you take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend? It's one of the best ways to help this work reach the women who need it most. You'll find show notes, links, and resources from today's episode at powertoflourish.com. And now just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It's not therapy, medical advice, or a substitute for professional support. And listening doesn't make me your therapist or doctor, though if you're looking for a coach, you know where to find me. All right, beautiful one, that's it for now. Until next time, trust yourself, honor your gifts, and keep flourishing.